hosts of legal issue of the day. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone, particularly the citizens of Indianapolis, and here's why I want to give a special thank. For the first time in a long time, I woke up every day this week and there was no evidence of of homicides. And I think that maybe we can discuss this. Maybe it had a lot to do with the really cold weather. Joining me today is my superstar attorney Milton Grimes out of LA, who famously represented Rodney King. Attorney Grimes, how you doing today, sir?
Morning, sir. I'm doing fine.
Your weather in LA is probably better than it is here in Indy.
Well, as you can see, I'm dressed in winter attire. It's all 68 degrees cold here.
We're not mad at you, but we had, for our audience, before I get to national news, I want to talk about a few local things here in the city. As everybody knows, we have probably the most important election ever this year. And so we have a lot of people running for governor on the Republican side and not a lot on the Democrat side, not a lot of activity, a lot of money coming into these elections. We saw a record amount of money spent in which Jefferson Street tried to hijack the mayor's office, tried to purchase this site, spent millions and millions of dollars for a job that pays what, about $100,000. And it was a nightmare for me personally, because every day I woke up, I was seeing his commercials after commercial with a conclusion to solution without set forth any reason. He talked about reduction of crime, and it was insulting to me because the Republican legislators passed legislation that gave everybody guns. You know, it was the dumbest thing. So now we're all less safe because of these rules that we have a supermajority in the state house that passed laws that adversely affected our city. They're not making the guns in the black neighborhoods, they're imported, and we just had a high amount of killing. But the second thing in our local issue is that we have an interim chief, our chief of police, who's African-American, resigned, and there's a search for a chief. We got a call on the line. What do you think about the chief of police opening, caller?
Well, my concern at this point, Mr. Lee, is that, first of all, I think that they could find someone certainly within the ranks. I, like you, this week noticed that we did not have as many shootings. I'm going to blame a lot of it, as you've indicated, on the weather. Extremely cold here, and people are forced to stay in housing. So that kind of ties into the second phase of a comment that you made when you opened the program. Housing is a major issue, and rent continues to go up, and people need places to stay. So they're keeping warm somewhere, because consistently throughout this week, I noticed that they were having people go out and try to get the homeless off the streets due to the fact that it's extremely cold. But when it comes down to finding someone to take over the police chief's job here in the city of Indianapolis, I'm sure it's no different than any other city in the country. LA, Chicago, and Indianapolis specifically. It's going to take a lot to turn things around. People are going to need an opportunity, and it's there. I don't know about you, but I know several times this week and last week too, everywhere I went, whether it was to the dry cleaners or to a fast food service or whatever, they always had staffing problems. So I'm trying to figure out where all these people working at, and when they are not working at it, what are they doing? So in the interim, if they're getting into crime, then we turn around and we've got police shootings, and they keep saying that the police chief or the police department is not doing their fair share to control all this. I know it's a big issue, but somewhere along the line, we have to be able to address that with a new police chief. And the interim person that's there now is willing to help do the search, but he doesn't even want to take part in it. And I think he's one of the deputy police chiefs on the force. So I hope that we get that resolved along with the housing issue, because this weather doesn't seem like it's going to be breaking anyway soon.
Well, and, you know, a lot of people, one of the problems we have, a lot of people sometimes forget the historical things that occurred. Like the interim police chief had left the department to take over as a police chief in North Carolina. And remember what happened to him when he went to North Carolina? They uncovered that he had some domestic problem, battery or something. And so that kind of blew up. And then so he came back to Indianapolis. So I think that one of the challenges is that I think there may be some trepidation that if he, took the chief here, that comes back to light. And of course, but the interim chief, he doesn't get the public purview in terms of the background. But the second problem, though, last year, I think we had a record number of shooting by police officers of African American males. I don't ever remember so many between August and about December. You remember about every week, it seemed like some African American got shot by a police officer. We're investigating several. One guy got shot in a tree. Officer come up and shot a guy. And another guy we discovered, I just recently found out this week, was shot when he hadn't done anything. Got fear, ran from the police, jumped the fence. Police reached across the fence and shot him in the back or something. So it was one of these shootings until whoever the police chief is, they need to address this issue of excessive force or deadly force. Is one of the pillars of democracy. But if you give police too much power, then that's not the right way to go. We do need policing, but not the policing that I've seen in terms of the amount of shootings that we've had, particularly with African American males. Caller.
Yeah, and I think at some point it's going to be really curious to see who they pick as a representative. I know the gentleman that's in place now that's doing the interim piece is saying that he thinks there are certainly leadership within the department, but they may find themselves going outside the city of Indianapolis and the state to find another person to come in here with ideas that could clean it up. But I think it's only one small part of the whole evolution of things that are going on. On the national level, I know you're going to get to it, President Biden and former President Trump are going to probably be locking heads. And when that happens in November, whichever one comes out on top, there's going to be a change in this country. It's already starting to be that way. But somewhere along the line, we've got to turn a lot of this around because I see more crime. And they continue to talk about the education of all kids, not just children of color, but we got a lot of people in this country that aren't so-called white, and they're going into these public schools and charter schools and so forth, and they're being educated, but I don't know what kind of education they're given. Plus, the languages are changing. This is an interesting time in the United States of America, in my mind, let alone our small problems that I would consider that we have here in Indianapolis, which is part of a bigger issue.
Well, that's a good comment. Also, Attorney Grimes, one of the things that has populated the news, and you probably have the same situation in your city, but I think in California you have legislation on gun control out there, right? Do you have any gun control laws in your state?
Yes. If you own, yes, we do have gun control, Nate. But there's still too many guns in people's hands. Speaking of police chief, we're going to be losing Michael Moore, our police chief, in a couple of months. He's retiring, so we'll be looking for another police chief. It's important who you hire because that person will be dictating the culture within that department. And the culture within the department has changed. Michael Moore has, a year ago, outlawed, so to speak, pretextual stops. No more stopping of minority men, African Americans, and Latinos for minor offenses or infractions as a pretext stop is what it's called. But they're still doing it. I have a couple of cases pending now with recent pretext stops, but he has put into operation that pretext stops will not be allowed. So whether they're going to be suppressing evidence that was obtained after a pretext stop, I have still yet to see, but that is the rule on the books. So that's our situation.
Attorney Grimes, just a quick question. Are you having more police action shootings out there? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I think here in Indianapolis, we've got more police action shootings. I think Nathaniel Lee can tell you that we've had in the last few weeks. And I think it's because the police officers are literally scared when they pull over and, as you say, do these stops. They're not wasting any time. If they see anything that looks anywhere near suspicious, they'll start shooting before they're asking questions.
Well,
And you know the reason why.
I believe there's a decrease in actual shooting, but the decrease is still in the hundreds that we have a year. It was
Okay.
almost one a day for a while there. But, I read this book by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talked about our policing and what one of the problems is. I just saw an app. Let me skip to another subject, come back to that. I saw a, uh, article in the paper this past week about opening for police officers and people with armed forces experience are up front in getting those jobs. Um,
Hmm.
I don't think that should be the proper necessary background for law enforcement because you deal with different rules of law from armed enforcement to the civilian society. But that's who we still are recruiting. And so this guy I'm sorry, not Michael, Malcolm Gladwell, um, recently wrote a book about what he thinks we need to do, and that is raise the educational requirement and raise the pay of police officers because it is one of the most dangerous, demanding jobs in our country, where you will meet a person who is calm as we are talking now, and another person you may meet, which is 35% of the population in the homeless community, with mental illness. And people have
Hmm.
to have a degree of education and knowledge to deal with mental illness. You can't confront a person with mental illness in the same harsh tone an aggressive tone that you will a suspected person who's committed the crime. You have to de-escalate. And many of the officers we have still affront with the same uh, behavior, whether you have mental illness or not. And so they escalate many situations in that. Um, and so I think his requirement of looking at the educational background, looking at the pay that you're paying these officers, they deserve good pay, but we also deserve good officers. So
Oh,
I was,
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, the other issue, though, Attorney Grimes, has to do with our caller Pierre wanted to know about your district attorney, George. Is it Gascon?
Gascon, yes,
Gascon, he's from Havana, Cuba, right? And
yeah.
there's some controversy with him now. Has he done a good
Well,
job out there?
controversy, there's been a movement within his own department. Many, if not the majority of his deputies are against him. I mean, he not set it aside, but he cut down the use of three strikes law on individuals. He wanted to um, he made a push on exoneration of people who've been convicted in LA County. We're looking at some cases and changing the decision that had been made in some cases. Oh, he has a lot of enemies within his own department. Um, I support him, Nate, because I think that he is trying to um, cut out or reduce the number of incidents involving shootings and police brutality in that old guard. Um, and he's looking for programs in the alternative of imprisonment. So, yeah, he's got problems in his department.
So he got low approval rating. Is it likely to get reelected?
I think he has a chance of getting reelected, but he's going to have a fight uh, from several people from his department. Yeah, he's known as a liberal district attorney, and that's not popular today.
Yeah, I know. And speaking of that, but the district attorney before that was African American, Jacqueline Phillip Lacey.
Jackie Lacey, she was the district attorney, yeah, before him.
Yeah, but she ran amok and irritated a lot of people, particularly in the African-American community, to my understanding.
I supported Jackie the first time. This last time, she did. She showed no love to the African American community, disappointingly so. Her husband got into a little entanglement by drawing a gun on some people who came to their home to protest. I forgot what the exact case or protest was, but yeah, she was a disappointment. She was.
Yeah.
If I could interject one last comment before I hang up here and listen to the rest of the show, I hope that one or both of you gentlemen could address one issue that did come up this week that somewhat concerns me. It's regarding Texas, the Texas militia being able to stop federal officials from going in and, at the border, being able to assist migrants. There's something about that seems a little strange to me. Maybe you guys can enlighten me a little bit from the legal aspect, but it sounds like Texas has its own laws and the federal government cannot supersede that. So I'll listen to it, and you guys have a great day.
I saw that article in the newspaper, and it's concerning to me that state law enforcement would take difference with federal law enforcement and actually, for lack of a better description, draw a line in the sand. I don't know what they're trying to do, but didn't Texas succeed from the Union at one time? Or,
They
we think, they think, huh?
I'm glad he brought that up. Let's talk about this real quickly, then we'll have to call on. Audience, there's something very important. What is the principal problem associated with the border in terms of being able to get this in an organized format? Was funding. For years now, particularly Biden administration, they tried to get legislation passed because a lot of these people are entitled to political asylum. Some should be deported back to their own country. And so each case is a different situation. So you have to have judicial officials to review each application. So you got 2.5 million people, and there's a significant backlog, and they do not have the judicial system that could handle that. So to address this problem, you have to first deal with the legal aspect. There's multiple aspects. You got border security, meaning you have to have people, armed guards, watching the border, but then the people who have legitimate reason, they have to be properly processed. The folks that they keep using the term migrant, but they're immigrants, folks. Migrants are people that could be in your city, go from place to place to work, but immigrants are people from a foreign country coming to our country that are seeking the American way of life, including employment. So the legislation is in place, and why has it not been done? Well, the Republican Congress people, the idiots in Congress, even though Republicans in the Senate agreed to this, the idiots in the Republicans in Congress refuse, because Donald Trump say, we do not want to give Biden a win in an election year. So in other words, it is being intentionally sabotaged, and people complain about the border crisis, and they're the one that's causing it. It's insulting, quite frankly. So remember this, in order to fix the border crisis, it's a potpourri of things that has to be done. You have to have funding for guards. You have to have funding for the court system. So all this is tied up by some idiot Republicans in the House of Representatives. Now, just keep that in mind. And Donald Trump is this key culprit. He contacted them to say, do not pass any legislation. So now we're being held hostage by a person who's got 91 indictments. Shameful.
So what's going to happen, Nate? I mean, are they actually going to fire on the federal, on the border patrolmen, actual federal law enforcement? I mean, what is the extent that this state law enforcement going to act? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't think that these citizens should be becoming a bunch of outlaws himself because, you know, in other words, just because you don't like something, that don't give you the right to go out and start killing people. So
Right.
if they turn around and kill some of the people, they should be prosecuted. They're still human beings, you know, whether immigrants or otherwise. You can't go out and take the law into your own hand. We can't become a lawless nation because a lot of people, like some people from Haiti, for example, they have legitimate reasons in terms of the turmoil in the government. Not just people from Cuba and places like that, but there's some legitimate things in other countries that would entitle these folks to seek refuge in the United States. We're a nation of immigrants. This country, you know, everybody's here except Native American, they're immigrants. You know, except blacks who came as slaves that Nikki Haley keep forgetting, you know, in the president campaign race. But the point I'm making is that, folks, we're a nation of immigrants, and these are immigrants who are trying to. Yes.
Yeah, but my question is, are they really setting themselves up for a battle there? The picture I saw in the paper was that I thought it was a law enforcement group from Texas standing at the border, not just citizens, vigilantes or whatever they call themselves.
Well, I just saw a brief thing on it, and I don't like the idea of these so-called, I'm not sure what the hell they're calling them, but I think if they start shooting people, that they should call them murderers.
Okay.
You know. But anyway, let's go to the call. Pierre, you got a question or comment for us today, sir?
Well, I got a couple. Thanks. Good morning, Nate and Milton.
Pierre.
My opinions on this. Milton, I follow Jasmine Canick out of LA, and she makes the point on her blog that the Republicans are near unanimous in their opposition against illegal immigration. Democrats, we're all over the place. We're not unified on this issue. Some believe the border is too porous and too open. Some believe it's just right. And, you know, it doesn't do Democratic leaders any good to stick their head in the sand and keep, you know, reiterating talking points from the Biden administration about the Republicans not wanting to fund this, that, or the other. The fact of the matter is we got people pouring across the border. We've even got Chinese people pouring across the border, and I'm wondering how many of those people are Chinese agents. You know, this border thing is out of control, and the president of the United States of America is not doing anything about it.
Well, wait a second.
Greg Abbott.
Hey, Pierre,
hold on a second.
Hey, hold on a second, Pierre. Let me correct something here. The border situation didn't start in January of 2021. This crisis been around for decades. So this is not a new problem. This has been an ongoing, existing problem. It's getting more publicity now because we have a slight increase, but it's an ongoing problem. That's the first issue. Make that clear. The second issue, the most important part about this, there's always been legislation to address the problem that's been blocked in Congress. See, in order to deal with the border crisis, it has two components. It's got a law enforcement component and it has a legal component. The legal component in the border crisis is a crisis. The Biden administration took aggressive steps to address this that's been blocked in Congress. So it's not accurate that Democrats got their head in the sand. Everybody's aware of this. Nobody that I know thinks that this is a good thing. It's terrible. We have a lot of human suffering that unnecessarily. You have people doing this chaotic stuff by shipping these people to strange places. So in other words, this is a dysfunctional process. But the process is not been started just recently. It's been around for a while.
I don't care. Democratic talking points. At least Greg Abbott is looking like he's doing something. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. Quite frankly, the president ought to adopt what the Republicans want to do and go further. These people are then he's shipping illegal aliens, illegal immigrants up to Chicago and New York. You know, that's got to stop. And the president's not doing anything about it. He's just sitting there. And then we got folk like you, Nate, that come on with the Democratic talking points. The man needs to act, and he needs to look like he's acting on this immigration crisis. He's up there in the White House doing absolutely nothing. And if you think this is not going to affect Democratic prospects in November, you are sorely mistaken.
What do you think he should do, Pierre? What do you think he should do?
I'm going to tell you what he could do tomorrow. He could adopt what the Republicans want to do, and he could go further. And that would put them in the trick bag. That would put them in the trick bag.
No. What exactly do you think is a Republican plan? Did you read what the senator?
They want to go back. They want to go back to what Trump was doing when he was president. They want to stop this catch and release. They want to have a policy of remain in Mexico. All of that could be implemented tomorrow. And I'm telling you, Black people in these cities are not happy with all of this illegal immigration. They're not happy with the president on Gaza. They're not happy, man. And he could do more. And he could stand up to the Israelis, but he's not doing it. And we're going to lose in November if he doesn't get his act together. That is the bottom line. One other thing I wanted to tell Milton, and a new thing here in Indianapolis, Nate, get your opinion on this. Quite frankly, I think it's a way for the city to avoid some sort of liability. We've got this new mental health crisis unit that will be dispatched to go out and deal with mental health problems. I'm wondering how this is going to work, because, you know, a person with mental issues can go from 0 to 100 in a flash of a second. I think, quite frankly, it's a way for the city to help avoid liability in some of these situations where they go out and a person ends up dying. Now the city lawyers can say, well, we sent out the mental health team and we did our best, no liability. So I wanted to see what you thought about the new mental health crisis team, Nate, being dispatched by the dispatcher, which is crazy.
Well, can I interject, Nate?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, don't you think people who are well trained in mental health, I mean, well trained, not just a cop with a gun on his hip, but people who knows how to address and defuse a person with mental illness in a situation, don't you think it's best to send out people who are qualified to do that, just like we call an ambulance when a person is injured, that we should call and address? We should address the call, and if it's a mental health call, we should send out people who specialize in that as opposed to police officers.
They should go out with the police. They should go out with the police, because we've had officers on the scene with some of these mental health issues to try to de-escalate, try to talk the person down, try to communicate, establish rapport, all of that stuff. They walk through all the numbers, and they still have to end up taking this violent grown man down physically.
Maybe some
mental
incident.
health expert. Huh?
Wait a second.
Go ahead. I said that may be some situations like
Milton,
that.
hold a second. That's a mistake, man. I've looked at a number of these police shootings.
Okay.
And most of the police shootings that I've seen, the actual video footage, the suspect are not being violent when they're shot and killed by the police officer. The suspect, for example, the one young man was up in a tree having a medical emergency. They shot him unarmed. Another young man was in a car. Police chased him. He hadn't done a crime. He ran anyway. He jumped the fence. The cop shot him over the fence. So he was not a danger. So very rarely.
So how would a mental health expert handle that situation? You
wait a
still
second,
need.
let me finish. The point I'm making
With
is
less violence.
the point I'm making is that that's a misstatement when you say they're being violent. They're not being violent. But let's get back to this thing. There was a significant misstatement that Pierre made about the border. Most people, he's saying the Democrat talking point, but what happened is that it was the Republican had a bill, was House Rule Bill 6542, but the Senate also had a bill by the Republican. But the House would not approve the bill. So these bills about the border, folks, they've been around, but they get blocked by the Republican House of Representatives. But the bills has to do with these essential functions. One, you got to have funds to increase the capacity of the court system. See, in America, there has to be a legal process for people to matriculate or to move into the United States of America. There's a legal process. The legal process now, in order to do that, is maybe up to about a 10-year delay. And so
that's right.
Because you don't have a legal process, and this is not a talking point, this is a funding problem that has been blocked by the Republicans in the House of Representatives. This idiot blockage, and then they say the president's not doing anything. Whether you like the president or not, the point is the legislation is being blocked. So I want to make sure people understand that. This is not guessing. You could go on the internet and check the bill. And so it's, in fact, the bill that is pending from the Senate is by the Republican. And so the Republicans in the House.
What would be the problem doing what the Republicans want on the border?
Well,
what would be the problem? Then you take away their argument. They have no more argument. Then you go further and you ask for more money to do more.
Okay,
what
Pierre,
would be the problem?
Hey, Pierre, hold it, Pierre. You're missing the point. Here's something very important that I want you to do some additional research. The problem is that the bill from the Senate was drafted by the Republicans. So it's the Republicans in the House who are blocking legislation that the Republicans in the Senate got done in the Senate. So if you look and so in other words,
do what they want on immigration. Hey, I'm gonna get off the phone, Nate, but I want to ask you this one question. Just one question I want to ask you and Milton. Is James Clyburn concerned about the president's approval ratings among blacks? Did he just say that the other day? James Clyburn, now this is his main man. You know, this is his main man. Is James Clyburn concerned about the president and his prospects come November? That's all I want to know.
Okay. Now, thanks, Pierre.
My point. Thank you.
Take care.
What is the answer to his question?
Everybody's concerned.
If anybody knows.
Everybody's concerned about election, and because one of the problems we have now is misinformation. Like that's a glaring example. We have a guy who watches the news, and the news doesn't report things accurately. He characterized what I was saying as Democrat talking point and missed the point that I actually do my research. You know, I'm a trial lawyer. I'm not guessing about this stuff. I've looked at the legislation. Most people don't look at legislation and they don't understand the process. In this case here, the immigration process is a funding issue. In order for the government to act, you have to have Congress pass legislation to fund the government operation. So if you don't have money in the budget to pay for guards to guard the border, if you don't have money to pay for the court system to process people, or you don't have money to pay for the housing, it's chaos. And so what has occurred is that we have some Republican representatives.
Chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos. They couldn't elect a leader. They got rid of their leader and they got a new leader. And so you have a small band of Republicans in the House of Representatives who blocks all legislation. Now Donald Trump is joining the bandwagon, so they can't get legislation passed. So they say Biden's not doing anything and not realizing every day they've been working on this. I've seen the notes and stuff like that, and they can't get these few. They have a band of maybe 12, 13 Republican House members that blocks essential legislation. So net resulted, they said nothing being done at the border. Well, that's a bold-faced lie. They've done everything they can, but you can't get these people who block legislation. Now, what the problem is, the Republican has a slim majority in the House, but because they have a slim majority, they control the speaker. The way government works, folks, is because they have the Speaker of the House, they can block legislation with that slim majority. So because they can block legislation, the Republican caucus says that unless you have us agree to it, then it shouldn't go before the floor. If it got on the floor of the House of Representatives, it was easily passed. But you got to remember that if they themselves don't agree to it in their committee, it will never get to the floor of the House. And that's what the problem is. And so the Democrats have done a poor job of messages. They're being blamed for this, but the fault lies directly with about 12 to 20 of these diehard idiot Republicans in the House of Representatives who blocking this essential legislation. So I want to make that clear to you. Just do your own research. Now, the second,
so we have a marketing problem again. They're not promoting the good things that Biden has done, and here again, the Democrats are being blamed for the chaos on the border.
Yeah. See, and also, like you have Pierre pointed out that, well, you're concerned about Biden raiding with black folks, right? Well, okay, what has happened? We have the lowest black unemployment we've had since I've been a lawyer. We have the unemployment rate nationally is like 3.7%. Biden has created more jobs during his administration than any president in the history of America.
So here again is who controls the spin of the topic, Nathaniel. And if they are making black people think that Biden does not care for them, a lot of black people are saying that Biden hasn't done anything for them. So maybe the Democrats have to step it up a little bit to show what the information is. Truly.
Well, no, Vanita has some excellent ideas. Like, for example, he gave a lot of loan forgiveness to college students, which is a big deal. You know, I see these young folks, you know, I interview them from time to time for jobs in a law firm. In Milton, their student loans are outrageous. You know, like, it's not like 100,000, maybe 300,000 or $400,000. Oh my goodness, how in the hell you run up a debt like that, right? You know, now your professional school costs 60,000 to 70,000 a year. You got 4 years of college, so now you before you get done, you have debts of $400,000. If the interest rate go up to 9% or 8% on $400,000, you got $32,000 a year in interest alone. So it's like you got this noose around your neck. And by the way, they can't discharge it in bankruptcy. So I think that Biden tried to forgive the debts to give these kids a break, and the Republican, they blocked it. You know, they filed lawsuits and things like that. And so when people say, well, he's not doing anything, well, okay. And then they turn around and criticize us for legislation that they blocked. And it's just infuriating to me. The other thing,
we keep complaining about they are not disseminating the information that needs to be disseminated to change the spin that the Republicans are putting on Biden's lack of achievements.
Yeah, in reality, I got a list of about 100 things they've done that's been outstanding. Starting with the fact that you look at the job report every month. Maybe people ignore that. Every month we got record amount of jobs being created. People not paying attention.
Aside from this show, I don't hear that. Aside from this show, I don't hear that from anywhere else.
Yeah.
That list of achievements.
Yeah, we have a record, like in terms of Black community, we have the highest number of African American appointed to the federal bench ever in the history of America. If Biden get a second term, probably about 20% of all of the judges in the federal court be African American the way he's doing it. I mean, the U.S. attorneys, historically speaking, we have the highest number of African American U.S. attorneys in the history of America. Obama had 13, Biden got like 23. I mean, that's incredible. So for the first time, we're getting a pro rata share of appointments. And so the list goes on and on. And so they have what I think is a messaging problem, because the Republicans they have this narrative. You know, what shocked me the other day, Milton, okay, Trump won in Iowa, and they were saying that 70% now of the Republican primary voters believe that Trump won the 2020 election. And it was insane. I'm thinking, are you freaking kidding me? He lost by over 7 million popular votes. And now they think the guy, and by the way, they ignore the fact that they won on the same ticket. They won governor's office, they won senator office, they won congressional office. The only person that lost was Trump. And so it's maddening to me, and people completely ignore evidence. They completely ignore it. But
Can you hear me, Nate?
yes, sir.
Okay, I went black for a minute here.
Milton, is maddening to me about the fact that how people completely ignore evidence. You know, and speaking of that, speaking of Donald Trump, man, he's got a war going on in the New York courtroom now. The jury determined that Eve Eugene Carroll, he had raped her in a department store and got a civil judgment against him, I think, of $5 million. And so it's been determined that he raped a woman in a store. I mean, I think in the history of America, we've never had somebody run for a political office like this who was adjudicated to have raped someone who's still popular. It's just bizarre.
Trump raped someone in a store?
Yeah, that's the verdict. The verdict says she sexually assaulted in a store. I mean, and the jury determined that what she said was credible.
All right.
And so now in the second part of the case on damages, he completely defamed her, saying that she was a liar and things like that. So now, but the court ruled that, wait a second, you can't really litigate the fact whether or not the rape occurred or not. That's already been decided. You did it. And so now we're in the damage phase, and the trial may end next week, but you're going to see another verdict. And so the second case that's pending in New York has to do with fraud. And that's a little bit more sophisticated because basically they were saying Donald Trump corporation, a business entity, inflated their value of their property to secure financing. So when, like, for example, they were showing one example of the golf course in New Jersey, and I don't remember the exact number, so this is just a rough estimate. Like they said, for purpose of the bank, Milton, they said that the value of the property is $50 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for purpose of paying property tax, they're saying the value of the property is $5 million. So it's just glaring examples of what would be financial fraud. And so the judge determined in that case that he had in fact committed fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they've been doing the damage phase of it. And I saw where the state AG, Latita James, was asking for like $370 million. You know, and so that decision probably going to come out in the next 30 days or so. And it's going to be another verdict. So now you got adjudicated to have raped somebody, and now they're saying that you're a crook. I mean, it's just bizarre. And
it is. It is wild, and it's definitely a large step away from the precedents that's been set in this country for an orderly process. Wow. I don't know what you're going to do about it, Nathaniel Lee.
Well, you see, one of the things that is important is that all the listeners is that people got to make sure that everybody vote in this upcoming election. Last time, you know, it was a really phenomenal turnout in the 2020 presidential election. But at that time, you know, Milton, people have short memories, right? But let's just talk about what happened. We had what has been the worst pandemic in American history came into fruition in 2020. The president of the United States thought that you could cure people with COVID by injection of bleach into their system. It was just that crazy. People were dying every day. the economy got shut down, unemployment went through the roof. All of these things happened, right, under Trump's leadership. We had a record. He was the only president since Herbert Hoover back in the 20s that lost jobs like that. Had the most jobs since Hoover in the Great Depression, right? And so Biden takes over a shattered economy. He also had the people with massive illness. Trump did a really good job in terms of making sure there was money to develop vaccine and things like that. So I give him credit for that. But then once they developed the vaccine, they didn't have a good plan to distribute it. So Biden come along and get funding right away to make it available at drugstores everywhere. And then the pandemic, people got the shots and we attacked the problem, and we didn't, all of a sudden we weren't having 2,000 to 3,000 people dying every day.
All right.
People went back to work. We had a record number of jobs created, and for which Biden doesn't get credit for basically saving the country from this catastrophic loss. And so I was watching Trump give a speech, and he was saying, let's make America good like it was 5 years ago. I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, you were president a little bit over 3 years ago. So you want to forget about how the last year of your president was. It was an absolute disaster. You bankrupt the country. You incurred a debt of $8 trillion. $8 trillion, Milton. So in the history of America since 1929, the federal government created a deficit of 21 trillion. Well, Donald Trump in less than 4 years added 8 trillion to the deficit. And so we had that occur, and they were saying how great a job he did. And so, but we have an issue, Milton, in terms of messaging. How is it possible that people forgot about what happened in 2020? Nobody's talking about all those folks that were dying.
How is it possible? Because the spin is that he did a great job in his presidency, Nathaniel, and we don't attack that, and we don't prop up our present president with what he has done. So the spin doctors are getting an effective message across. That is, Biden has not done his job and Trump is the man for it. So that's the bottom line.
Wow, it's incredible to me as to how we can forget about this critical stage in American history. And then people are rewriting history before our very eyes, Milton. I saw Nikki Haley. She was on the news and saying that America has never been a racist country. She ignored the fact of slavery, Jim Crow laws, passage of the Black Code, lynching, murder, all that stuff. She completely ignored it. So now we're rewriting history. So we have our caller today even, we're talking about the border, and ignores the fact that the legislation is being held up by a few Republicans in the House, but more importantly, the border crisis has been here for a quarter of a century. It's not a new problem. It's getting more publicity now, but it's been a problem all along. And we all know that. And it's not about building a wall. It's about having a judicial system in place to deal with a overburdening legal process. You got to be able to have a legal process in place to handle this massive influx. Every case should be adjudicated by a competent judge. And once you do that, you move on. If they are subject to deportation, they get deported. But they should have their day in court. I'm a firm believer in that. That's the American way.
Well, Nate, we how do I say this? I read not long ago, and I can't recall the name of the book now, where the gentleman was listening to two white women looked like they were college graduates. They were college educated, and they were in their 60s, and they were traveling, and they were at, I think, the Jefferson. They were back on the East Coast visiting, touring, and he heard them say they did not know, and these are educated women, they did not know that Jefferson owned slaves. They did not know that he had a relationship with a slave and bore children, that books, our history books, have not fully told the truth about our history. And so it's easy to, when you take the books off the shelves, when you don't educate your public, it's easy to have an uneducated public whom you can tell these lies to, and they act on these lies. A lot of people think the Confederacy won the Civil War. You follow me? And they don't want books to, they don't want teaching now to refute that. They want you to go along with that. So I'm just saying, I hate to say that we have developed, I won't say ignorant, but we have developed an uneducated, uninformed society, and we can pretty much tell them what we want to tell them. And if we tell them enough, they'll believe it.
Hey, you know,
That's just right.
what we see in our very eyes is that there've been attack on diversity issues, affirmative action, things
Right.
like that. And then we saw the Ron DeSantis in Florida. He wanted to eliminate history,
Right.
you know. And so now we see Nikki Haley, who's running for president, same thing, you know. So I don't know what the answer is because I discovered that most, particularly a lot of young folks, they don't keep track of the news anymore. They get their news from their cell phone, and they get these. And the Republicans have been dominating that. They post just a series of misinformation, and you get bombarded with your cell phone news.
And you're feeding them this all day. You don't see a young person without this in their hand all the time. They own it while they're eating. They own it while you're talking to them. And they are on it getting this misinformation. That's what's happening.
Yeah. So next week, we got to tackle this problem. We got to get some experts to deal with how do we actually communicate with young folks, and how do we break through this vicious news cycle of this erroneous information being perpetrated. And, you know, I think it's something that we all have to do as community leaders, but we have to come up with a better plan, because ultimately, what's at stake is democracy in the next election.
Right.
You know, that's what's at stake. But finally, Milton, any closing statement as we close out today?
Voting this year is of maximum importance. I hope people understand that. This is a critical year. This may be the tipping point, so Malcolm Gladwell say, of our democratic existence. And we got a lot to do.
Well, audience, I echo that. And I want you to start preparing now to make sure you make the calls, to make sure that everybody that you know vote in the next election. The next election for the president and the state and local office is going to be the most important one in our life. What's at stake is democracy itself. We saw on January 6th of 2021, we saw people try to overthrow the federal government, and now they're being called political prisoners instead of criminals. And so now we're changing the dialogue again. But history is history. Don't let people rewrite history for you, because we have a sordid history in America and we made a lot of progress. But we got to keep fighting the good fight to make sure we don't lose those privileges that we've gained in the last 40 years. So thank you all for listening today, and thank you all callers, and thank my VIP guest, Milton Grimes, and our producer. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you next Saturday. And don't forget, stay warm. Take care, everyone.
Come to California.
Yes, sir.